Chemical bonds are fundamental to the structure and function of many types of molecules, such as proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, gases, salts, and water. These molecules are composed of atoms that are held together by three different types of bonds: covalent bonds, ionic bonds, and hydrogen bonds. Let's explore each one of these. An atom consists of a nucleus surrounded by charged particles called electrons. The electrons exist in various layers surrounding the nucleus called orbitals. Atoms are most stable when their outermost orbital is filled. Usually, the outermost orbital contains 8 electrons. If an atom's outermost orbital is not filled, electrons will move to fill this shell. The activity of electrons between adjacent atoms is the basis of chemical bonds. Let's explore ionic bonds first. Ionic bonds are formed when electrons are transferred from one atom to another. For example, one electron can move from sodium atom to the chlorine atom. After the electron is transferred, each original atom has changed basically its charge, and it's now called an ion. The sodium ion, having lost an electron, now has a positive 1 charge. The chloride ion, having gained an electron, now has a negative 1 charge. The transfer of electrons that formed the sodium and chloride ion gives them opposite charges. The attraction between the opposite charges of the sodium and chloride ions is called an ionic bond. Table salt, or sodium chloride, is an example of an ionic compound formed by the attraction between sodium and chloride ions. Ionic bonds are weak and will break easily in water. This is why salts dissolve in water. Since living systems are filled with watery solutions, the weak ionic bonds are uncommon in the body. Ions are extremely important for maintaining homeostasis, though. The changes and the charges on ions make them very useful. For example, movement of sodium ions through a nerve cell membrane enables nerve impulses to be generated. This is something we're going to be studying more about in chapter 12. The acidity of body fluids is regulated in part by the bonding of hydrogen ions with different types of negatively charged ions. Bones get its hardness and strength from the reaction of calcium, phosphate, and carbonate ions. We'll now explore the covalent bonds. The covalent bonds are created when two atoms share electrons in the outermost orbital. The oxygen molecule is formed by the sharing of electrons between two oxygen atoms. Both of the original oxygen atoms share the electrons. Covalent bonds are strongest of the bonds. Almost all the compounds in cells are held together by covalent bonds. These include water, oxygen and carbon dioxide gases, lipids, carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids, and ATP. Now, let's learn about hydrogen bonds. When electrons are shared within a molecule, they're not always uniformly distributed. A water molecule has 8 outer electrons contributed by its hydrogen and oxygen atoms. The electrons are quite strongly attracted by oxygen part of the molecule. This results in the oxygen end of the molecule having a slight negative charge, while hydrogens have a slight positive charge. These partial charges are indicated by Greek letter delta. The partial charges on these water molecules will have an effect on how these molecules line up with one another in a solution. The hydrogen end of the molecule will be attracted to the oxygen end on the adjacent water molecule. The weak attractive forces that determine the orientation of these molecules are called hydrogen bonds. Hydrogen bonds are easily breakable when they are exposed to changes in temperature or hydrogen concentration. Hydrogen bonds are found in other covalent bonds. Part of the structure of protein molecule is maintained by hydrogen bonds between adjacent sections of that molecule. The double helix of DNA molecule is also stabilized by hydrogen bonds.